Formula One may be on its annual summer shutdown, with teams and drivers stepping away from the spotlight, but the silence has been shattered by a seismic twist from the FIA, as the sport's focus drifts to the monumental regulation changes for 2026, and with most teams wrapping up their final upgrade cycles for this year's machinery, the governing body has detonated a shock announcement, a sudden change of plan over carbon brake discs. What was meant to be a period of calm reflection has instead turned into chaos, as engineers who had already mapped their strategies are now scrambling to adapt. The FIA's move has thrown paddock confidence into turmoil, sparking whispers of politics and power plays that could reshape the balance of power before the sport's greatest technical reset in decades. Gone will be the monstrous ground effect that today's machines lean on to generate nearly half of their downforce, a shift that, at least on paper, will finally bring relief to Lewis Hamilton. For the 7-time world champion, the ground effect era has been nothing short of a nightmare. Since its arrival in 2022, Hamilton has scraped just 2 victories while being beaten by his teammates in 3 of the last 4 campaigns. The problem? These cars rob him of the very trait he thrives on, a rock-solid rear end. When the centre of pressure suddenly migrates forward under corner entry, Hamilton's sense of control evaporates. But in 2026, that torment may at last end, with the next generation cars promising a handling balance that suits his style far better. Yet, as one demon disappears, another emerges. The new power units, with a staggering 50% of their power now coming from the hybrid system, are rewriting the very DNA of F1 car design. Teams have been forced to build their rear chassis around assumptions of how their engines will behave, gambling on incomplete data in the hope of finding harmony between combustion and electric power. And it is here, hidden in plain sight at the back of the car, that one of the most radical changes has been uncovered: in the brakes. Brembo, Formula One's undisputed titan of carbon disc technology, has lifted the lid on FIA requests so extreme they border on the absurd. Andrea Algeri, the company's F1 customer manager, revealed that teams are experimenting with shockingly small brake discs at the rear as they prepare for the aggressive energy harvesting that will define the new era. "We have seen different approaches across the teams," Algeri confessed. "It's mainly on the rear, because the rear axle design depends on how they design the power unit, the energy recovery and their strategy. We are a bit blind in this sense. What once seemed like a simple shift in regulations has become a full-blown engineering revolution, with even the brakes, the very instruments of control, shrinking into almost comical proportions. The 2026 revolution may yet free Hamilton from his struggles, but it threatens to plunge the rest of the grid into an uncharted world where certainty vanishes the moment they hit the brakes. Brembo's revelations don't just read like a technical memo, they land like a thunderclap across the paddock. Formula One's most trusted brake supplier is receiving requests so radical that even their seasoned engineers are left blinking at the numbers. Talk figures that don't add up, dimensions that make no sense, targets that seem designed more for bicycles than racing machines. Andrea Algeri, Brembo's F1 customer manager, could hardly mask his bemusement. "We have seen some outliers that will be very clever solutions if they are right," he said with measured caution. "Otherwise, they will have to redo the braking system after a few tests or races." It was less a statement than a warning. Brilliance and disaster are now separated by the thinnest of margins. And the standout revelation? The sheer shrinking of the rear discs. These are not small tweaks or subtle refinements. This is downsizing on a scale that borders on parody. Algeri admitted with a hint of disbelief, "On the rear axle, we have seen extreme choices in terms of disc dimension. They are very small compared to the current ones, both in diameter and thickness. It means they believe that on the rear axle, they are basically not braking at all, or only in a few cases. For the drivers, the brake revolution is more than an engineering headache. It's a psychological earthquake. Braking has always been the ultimate test of nerve, the razor's edge where milliseconds are won or lost. Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, masters of late braking heroics, may suddenly find their greatest weapon blunted. Imagine approaching turn 1 at Monza, not with the confidence to slam the pedal and dive past your rival, but with the uneasy knowledge that the rear brakes are little more than decorative plates. The new hybrid systems might reward precision and timing, but they strip away the raw gladiatorial element of bravery under braking. Even seasoned champions like Hamilton could find themselves recalibrating instincts honed over decades. What was once about courage may now become about battery management, hardly the stuff of fans' adrenaline-fueled dreams. Pause and picture that, the very pinnacle of motorsport, the fastest, most advanced racing machines on Earth, being prepped with rear brake discs discs so tiny they could double as coffee coasters in the Paddock hospitality suite. Engineers at Brackley, Maranello and Milton Keynes, who once demanded millimetre-perfect tolerances, are now effectively sketching orders that read, "Just give us the bare minimum, enough to keep the FIA scrutineers happy, and maybe, just maybe, enough to slow the car if Verstappen sneezes into turn 1. To call it radical would be an understatement. This is bordering on sacrilege. Braking in Formula One has always been one of the sport's most awe-inspiring spectacles. Cars slamming from 350 kilometers per hour to walking speed in less than 2 seconds. The discs igniting into molten orange halos as the driver's eyeballs strain against forces that no human should endure. The brake pedal has long been both sword and shield, the ultimate test of bravery and precision. And yet now, as F1 stares down the barrel of its 2026 revolution, it seems the rear brakes may soon be reduced to ceremonial ornaments, little more than props, while the hybrid recovery systems take center stage. And here lies the peril. It could work. In fact, it could be genius. The finest engineers in the world might have cracked the delicate equation of blending regeneration with traditional braking. If they have, then the 2026 cars will glide through corners with the grace of spacecraft, reclaiming energy with ruthless efficiency. But if they haven't, then Formula One risks opening the season to an absurd theatre of chaos, understeering cars spearing into runoff zones, rear ends refusing to cooperate, and drivers cursing brakes that seem more decorative than functional. And then there's the looming spectre of safety. Shrinking the rear brakes may make sense on paper, but what happens in the real world when something goes wrong? Tracks like Monza, Baku, or Spa demand ferocious deceleration from blistering top speeds. A failure in energy recovery could leave drivers relying on tiny rear discs barely capable of slowing the car. One miscalculation, one system fault, and the consequences could be catastrophic. The FIA insists every regulation is built with safety at its core, yet history has taught the paddock that bold promises don't always survive first contact with the racetrack. Engineers may celebrate efficiency, but for drivers strapped into 350 km/h rockets, the margin between innovation and disaster has rarely looked thinner. Imagine the first races, sparks flying under the floodlights of Bahrain, discs glowing faintly at the front while the rears look more like ornaments. Fans expecting a new golden era might instead witness a demolition derby, a grid full of cars fighting physics as much as each other. Drivers could be wrestling machines that refuse to obey, engineers frantically rewriting strategies mid-race, and teams learning the hard way that the margin between genius and disaster has never been thinner. And all of this because the quest for efficiency has pushed the sport to the very brink of what's possible. So, will 2026 be the dawn of a new golden era, or the biggest gamble Formula One has ever taken? The countdown has begun, and the truth will be revealed when the lights go out. Until then, we want to hear from you in the comments.